5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And welcome everybody to the Protective and Social Services Committee. The agenda today is one report, a verbal report from the director. We have other business and outstanding items list. So if we could start off with Mr. Chris Manuel to give us that verbal update, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll start with community social development. In community social development, supportive housing, there's a planning process underway to ensure that our 2 supportive housing sites that have been identified are proceeding along through the various permitting requirements. So a project team's in place and that plan's moving forward. They're working on outbreak planning for vulnerable populations. So in conjunction with GPREP, the team's working with the province on COVID-19 outbreak planning for primarily our street engaged and vulnerable populations. Rotary House due to we have found an overflow site in conjunction with the Oasis Church that will remain open until March 31st if needed. There's a Habitat for Humanity kickoff event that's occurring on August 6th here locally in Grande Prairie. I think council has been shared some additional details on that. Enforcement services, their selected traffic enforcement program of the month is distracted driving. So drivers of Grande Prairie, just be aware and cautious to the impacts of distracted driving, and enforcement officers will be out and about looking to emphasize that in their patrols. And there's also an emphasis on the bylaw enforcement education program for residential unlawful parking. Additionally, there's a positive ticket campaign underway where enforcement services is identifying citizens that are doing a great job following various rules and giving them various rewards for doing so. GPREP, the COT overflow program at the Bose Event Center, has now concluded, and the clients have transitioned back to various shelters or alternative housing programs. They continue to maintain a state of readiness at GPREP as they are doing assessments and preparedness for future events and escalations potentially with COVID. And the fire department indicates that their CAD upgrade in their dispatch center is progressing as per schedule, and they expect that the new technology, which helps prepare them for next generation 911 and is a vast improvement over their legacy software, should be operational by the first quarter of 2021. They also report that in conjunction with Alberta Health Services, they are easing back into their pre-COVID level of medical co-response. So essentially working closely to determine what call types can safely be attended and what level of PPE is necessary to do so. And the RCMP haven't provided anything this week, so that's the report. Oh, I believe you're muted, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. It's a great report. I was just wondering if any from council or committee would like to ask any questions. Okay, so just one question. When the COT program was at the Bose, approximately how many people were spending the night there on average?
It varied, I believe, between 30 and 40. I think the average was somewhere around 38.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I see that there is no other business, but we do have an outstanding items list, and if you wouldn't mind going through that.
Certainly. So all items are on track. I do have a question for committee, though. On item 1098, which is food truck permitting, my staff is asking for maybe a little further direction in that our item notes right now just identify that council refer this matter to the appropriate public meeting for further discussion. So we understand that there's a report desired, more or less, on the state of the industry, but we're hoping to get maybe a little bit more council or committee direction as to what they want to see, so we can make sure we're covering off what's desired.
Okay. I have some thoughts. Anybody else who was at that meeting that wanted to bring something up? Okay. Ms. Eunice Friesen, please.
Thanks, Chair O'Toole. Thanks for coming back for clarification on this. One of my concerns was the limited spaces where trucks could operate. And what I'm hoping is that perhaps some street spots could be identified where there's maybe not parking along one side of the street, or where there's green space along one side of the street, or not residential parking. So just different places like that where might make sense to allow food trucks under certain conditions. Also, the consideration of parking the food trucks at home and just separating whether that's a home-based business from not, that was really important. And then because it seems to us, to some of us, that it's like taking a service truck home, and there's no restrictions on parking service trucks at your residence. So that's my recollection.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. No, that's good feedback, Councillor. I will just note that we were able to provide the applicant with clarity around the parking piece. It's that essentially they are subject to the same requirements that service trucks would be. So it's not a free-for-all in service trucks either, but we can certainly speak to that in the report about how everybody's essentially being treated same.
Okay, Mr. Bressie?
Great. One thing I'm hoping to have a conversation about too is where they're allowed to park when they're hired to cater an event. Where it's are they? So whether it's at my house or whether it's at the park, is there room to let them park in places they wouldn't usually be allowed to just set up, but they can if somebody's got a park use permit or they're doing some other private home? I'd love to have that conversation.
Yes, the lady that brought this up, her concern was they used to host a lot of birthday parties and anniversaries, and it was in the residential areas, and they used to just be able to pull up to the yard, park on the street, and then when it come time to eating, they could disperse there at other communities. So I just wanted to touch on what Mr. Bressie brought up. So, all right, you got enough? Oh, Mr. Given.
Yeah, so I wonder, Dr. Manuel, appreciate that there's a number of specifics that were raised by the delegation. Sounds like some of those have been addressed directly with her. I wonder if it'd be helpful for council to understand the different regulations that do apply to food trucks. So maybe a bit of an overview. We had a delegation that came with some specific concerns, but I think that's probably the first this council has dealt with food trucks. It might be worthwhile to have a report that sort of outlines the state of affairs as it is today, about how they're permitted, where they come from. So before we get into making decisions about specifics, or along with decisions about specifics, that we at least get a better sense of what the actual system is that regulates food trucks before. I would like us to see that so we can decide whether or not there's a need for intervention and changes. Because it might be worthwhile for us just to see what the system actually looks like before we jump in to say, okay, let's change the system. Hopefully a report that comes forward covers a little bit of that background and helps council have a better understanding of all the regulations that are already in place.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given, for adding that little bit there. That is important as well. Yeah. Mr. Minhas?
Yes, I'd like to echo with Bill Mayor, given what he said. Are we changing because of the COVID-19, or it be just changing for generally because of the more food trucks? Or I just want a clarification, because food truck, we never had any issue before, but last couple of months we just hearing more and more. Yeah. Is there any reason, Chris, if you can explain me?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So in response to the question, no, I don't think COVID has frankly changed too much. What we've seen is a significant escalation in the number of food trucks. In years past, we maybe had less than a dozen. Now we have probably a couple dozen in the community. So there is a little bit more competition. One thing I do want to clarify is there's no limitation on private property as far as when the delegation came forward, they said, look, the city says we can only go in these spots. Well, those are the only city-controlled facilities that we were permitting, and they actually expanded that list following the meeting. But that doesn't preclude a truck from going to Ernie's, going to Canadian Tire, going to a lot of those spots that you see them on a regular basis. We don't govern that at all as far as limiting where they're parking. And even some of the on-street stuff, again, a lot of that came down to interpretation. Presently, if they fall within a certain size and weight requirement and they're lawfully parked, there's nothing preventing them from being near a playground, for instance, which has come up. So I think what I've gotten from the conversation so far is we need everybody to understand the current state. So we'll bring forward a report that identifies the current state. I also think it's going to be important for us to do a little bit of community engagement, a survey of sorts, work with the communications team on that, just to get a pulse as to what the community's expectations are. One of my concerns is if we make too many changes without hearing some of the alternative perspectives, because certainly administration hears the flip side of this. If you put a food truck in a residential neighborhood, some people are happy, but some people may not be happy, and we've heard some of that come forward as well. So I do want everybody to have a real 360-degree view of what the public's opinions are on the various components of this.
So just to follow up, Mr. Manuel, after the meeting with the city folks, the delegation phoned me up, and they were very pleased with how the system was being looked at and their concerns. So that's a plus to administration that they had a discussion, and the questions that she had were answered, and she was very pleased with the whole process that was taking place. So that's a positive.
We appreciate that. I think much like council, administration identified that a lot of it was just the correct understanding of the rules that do exist and why. And I think when we're able to relay that, and there's always some room for further dialogue and discussion as to why we do certain things or whether we should change them. But, very much like council, we do try to work with applicants to find that appropriate balance.
Awesome. Is there any more questions on the food truck concern? Okay, so then what we'll do is move into the, continue on with the outstanding items list.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I can just confirm that the dates for all the other items are on track, and we should have some reports coming forward at the next meeting.
Okay. I'm looking for a motion. Mayor Given.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to receive for information.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Aye. There we go. And according to my schedule, this meeting is now over. Thank you very much.
I think this is my turn now. Thank you very much, Kevin McCool. You did a good job. And now is our corporate service committee agenda today, and we are me, Bill Mayor Given, and Tool and Friesen, and we are member all here today. So item 101 is the director service update. Shane Bro, could you please update it to where we are today after holidays?
Thank you, Chairman Haas. A brief update here this morning. Taxation payments have slowed down as the deadline has been extended to August. There was a surge up to the end of June, which is our normal timeline, but it has slowed. We expect that to pick up again mid-August. Saying that, we have not had to use our line of credit, and at this point aren't expecting to. It was a good safety measure, but thankfully residents of Grande Prairie have been paying their taxes, which have helped us continue operations without having to utilize the line of credit to date. We're just finalizing our Q2 financial report, which will come to the next committee. That'll give us a much better picture of where our position is in response to COVID. So that'll be coming to the next committee meeting. From procurement, one thing I wanted to highlight is that we've completed 129 competitive bids to date in 2020. That's trending 35% higher than even 2019. And this is mainly due to a more centralized procurement approach, and we're running more fulsome processes and more robust processes centrally controlled by procurement, which is increasing our value for dollar and control over the processes within our organization. From our GIS and ITS department, one thing I highlight that would be interesting to the committee is that we have secured a new committee document management system. We're on track to have that rolled out the very end of August is our optimistic date, but if not, it'll be early September. And so you'll see a transition into a new document committee management software package. If there's any training required, we'll make sure that is rolled out to council, but I'm very excited that we'll be modernizing our system from our current system, which is no longer supported by the vendor. And one other, I don't normally talk about staffing recruitments, but this is a position that deals with council significantly, and that we're currently recruiting for a new communications and marketing manager, which will be posted until the end of August, and we'll look forward to hiring someone new to bring those two departments together and give new service to the city and the council. So that is ongoing, and those are my updates here for this morning.
Thank you very much, Shane. Is there any question for update? I see none. All right, thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman Hess. Shane, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but do you have a sense in terms of what percentage of tax payments the city has received? Like, out of the number of people who need to pay property taxes, what percent have we received? And even a high-level sort of approximation would be helpful.
The last number that I have, which is admittedly a little bit dated from before vacation, from my vacation, was a third of who normally pay by the end of June, which is the bulk, had paid. So that was much higher than we had expected by the end of June.
Thank you.
Thank you. So then we move to the next item, 201, Grande Prairie Airport direct vacancies, and that they got the letter to the mayor, and I'd like to, Mr. Shane, you can update it, like how they're hiring policy or what they need to know for the council.
Correspondence to the mayor. Thanks, Chairman Haas. I can just introduce it as the chair of the Airport Commission, which is wholly controlled by the city, has 2 vacancies they've asked to begin recruitment for. Administration would be just seeking some direction from committee on how to proceed with the recruitment of these 2 vacancies.
So go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, well, actually, I have a question, I guess, for administration. How close are we to initiating the city's regular recruitment process for agencies, boards, and commissions? My recollection is that we usually do that sometime in the fall, kind of get started. And so I'm curious how far away we are from kicking off that process.
I can answer that if that's okay, Chairman Haas.
Go ahead.
I usually aim to start it around the end of September, open up the applications, and it runs for about a month or 6 weeks.
Okay. Yeah, so that's helpful. So that's still a little ways away. The Airport Commission is similar to the Library Board and others, where the city is the sole appointing authority to that. I think it's appropriate for the city to lead that process. I wouldn't have a problem if the Airport Commission felt there was a need to start earlier. That end of September and then open for 6 weeks, is really starting to be, towards the end of the year that appointments would be made. And so I can appreciate if the commission felt that there was need to fill these 2 spots ahead of time. Fair enough. But I really believe it should be the city leading that. I don't know how other members of council feel about that, but that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Clyde, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Minhas. I think we've seen in the past that the Airport Commission could probably help us out with that if they have any thoughts about recruits. And I don't think there'd be any harm in asking them if that might help to move the process along. Bill, you go on.
Well, yeah, you know, I do see that in their letter that's attached in our package, they have kind of highlighted some of the criteria they'd like to see measured. I appreciate that the clerk's department has worked to put in a bit of a skills matrix. It would make sense to adapt that skills matrix to make sure that we include these as primary considerations if they're not already highlighted. Regional knowledge is not necessarily always one that we have for all of our committees, but you know, so I think we can take the input that they provided here, run that process. The challenge that we have, I think, is that in the past, the Airport Commission has wanted to recommend to council who should be appointed to the Airport Commission, which is a bit of a challenge when, you know, it's council is the approving authority. And I also wonder if there's FOIP considerations. If the city asks people to provide their personal information to the city for council's review and in the appointment process, and then council gives that information to another body, I'm not sure how that could be managed. But I think the most straightforward response to this would be to accept their request to start the recruitment early, to accept their request for the specific skills that they're identifying they have a need for, and to initiate that process and let them know that we're doing that.
Okay. Junice, you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I just was prepared to make a motion related to this, and that is that committee direct administration. Does it, to clarify, will this direction go forward out of committee, or does it then also have to come to council just to initiate the process? It can just come from here, correct? Yeah, okay. So yeah, I would like to make the motion that administration initiate the city's process to appoint the appoint individuals to the vacant seats on the Grande Prairie Airport Commission. And I'll leave it at that. But in speaking to it, I think that it's just initiating the process now and probably just using our regular communication process with the commission and our regular process internally.
So it's motion on the table. Any question on the motion, or adding or deleting? No? Well, is everything good? All in favor? Motion carried. Thank you very much. And then we go to the second one. The 301 Policy 100, Council reimbursement of expense and expense reimbursement. So who's gonna update that one? Arlene, you're gonna do that? Go ahead, please. Thanks.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee and council. Today, you are seeing the Policy 100 Council Remuneration and Expense Reimbursement Policy as directed by Council to bring it forward to this committee for discussion. At the discussion held at the Council meeting, one of the suggestions from Council was to clarify the term local region within the policy to better understand how to apply sections such as per diems and vehicle allowance within the local region. And we took that discussion and we came back with an amendment to this policy to have a definition included to clarify the term. As well, in discussion with administration, we did also make another amendment before this discussion today under use of personal technology, where the policy had initially indicated an amount, and it was set at $40 a month as a use of personal technology, your cell phone allowance. In discussion with administration, they're currently looking at revising and upgrading the administrative policy with regard to allowances. And so we decided to remove the actual amount out of this policy and just clarify that the amount paid would be paid monthly at an amount equal to the allowance set for city employees. That way we weren't locked into an amount that then we would have to amend later. Another note we did include under eligible expenses was just to say that with regard to expenses incurred and then absences of council members not attending an event, that cost would be paid by the council member, but that this may be waived due to emergent or extenuating circumstances if approved by the city manager. So we softened the language around that piece a little bit. And that the rest of the policy is still the same one that this council had reviewed when Council Remuneration Review Committee made their presentation. So I'm open to any questions.
Thank you very much for updating the policy in 100 for reimbursement. Is there any question on it? Kevin?
Just clarification, currently as when it comes to local region, currently it's right now, as long as it's in the city of Grande Prairie, we don't get paid travel expenses. But if it was in the Tech Center or Beaver Lodge or Sexsmith, we can claim travel mileage at that point. And what you're saying now is if it's
50 kilometers.
Maximum 50 kilometers. So if we went to Beaver Lodge the next term, the next council, it would be part of our mileage that we would accumulate through the contract or the policy, correct?
Thank you, Councillor Minhas. Yes, that would be the amount of mileage that you would accumulate within the local region would include a 50-kilometer radius of the city, and that would be paid to the council member as part of their vehicle, their monthly vehicle allowance, if you choose to approve the policy.
Oh,
awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Any other question on this one? Dylan, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate some of the changes the administration made. I actually had a number of those flagged, so I'm glad those got made. I'm trying to understand one thing in the per diems, and that is it says per diem shall not apply nor be paid for an absence from a council or standing committee meeting when the absence is the result of another event. I'm kind of confused by that because we don't get paid per diems for council or standing committees. Does that mean if I skip a council or standing committee meeting to go to another event, that event would be ineligible for a per diem because I should have already been working that morning anyways? Am I understanding that correctly?
Thank you, through the chair. That is correct. In discussion, the Council Remuneration Review Committee held, they felt that it would look like double dipping if you were to be paid for your normal work as a council member at a committee meeting and then also collect a per diem for attending another event while also being paid for your current work.
Totally, completely agree with them. So that's a great change. I just wanted to make sure I understood it.
Okay. Go ahead, Mayor Gibbon.
Yeah, so just for greater clarity, is there anything that would prohibit expenses for that event from being paid? I agree with the per diems not being paid under that logic, but so just to be clear, that doesn't mean that if you were traveling that day, that your travel expenses wouldn't be able to be claimed back. Is that, yeah, can you confirm, Arlene?
Thank you, through the chair. That is correct. Travel expenses are separate from your salary and or per diem.
All right. Go ahead, Bill. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the changes and the fact that administration was clearly listening when council had feedback. And so I think you caught just about everything. So one minor thing in the definitions where it has mandatory costs, in there it says mandatory costs mean all costs incurred by mayor's councillors, blah, 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 for attending a mandatory event, which it doesn't sort of define mandatory event. I know that they are defined later on in the policy, so if you could have mandatory events highlighted as mandatory events are those which reviewed and approved by council from time to time, referenced in this report or in this policy, something like that. Because it's weird for a definition to reference another term and then to not have that term defined, or at least point out where you can find the definition for that term. But other than that, I think it's great. I think it meets the spirit and the intent of the recommendations from the public committee that was struck, and I'm comfortable moving it forward.
Okay, thank you. Dylan?
Thank you. One other point of clarity that I know is confused about, and I'm still actually confused about, is when it comes to AUMA and FCM. Two questions about that. First of all, does this only apply to the big annual in terms of them being mandatory events? Is it only mandatory to go? Would it be only be considered a mandatory event to go to the annual conference, or to any AUMA such as Spring Leaders Caucus or things like that? Would those be considered mandatory?
Arlene?
Thank you. Through the chair, the intent of what is proposed in the policy was to be general. And so the Council Remuneration Review Committee did have a discussion about what would this council want, what specific events should be included in this policy. And so the committee didn't want to limit or put parameters around some of the items. Specifically, they felt that if there were something more specific or more definitive, that the council would be the one to have that discussion and to enable bigger or more defined parameters. As far as the Council Remuneration Reviews Committee was concerned, applying these as a general, as opposed to specific big ticket events, that if it was an AUMA event, that's what this policy applied to.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, so I just wonder on the item, so I wonder if mandatory events should maybe be placed in an appendix. And the reason that I'd say that is the policy says that they should be reviewed on an annual basis. It means that they may be subject to change more frequently than the policy itself. Council may, in 1 year, decide that an event is on or off the list. They may refine, and so we may want to have an ability to update the appendix from time to time without necessarily having to go through an entire policy change. And that would get to this question that Councillor Bressie raised. Is it does this council today, those we right now that are elected, do we think that it is all AUMA events, which there are lots, or is it only the AUMA annual convention and trade show? And our opinion might change on that over time. We might say, oh well, it's all, and then we realize that there's, oh my goodness, there's actually 30 of those that become mandatory events all of a sudden, and we may want to dial that back in the following year. So I wonder, and I actually don't have an opinion about the any or all at this point, but just the idea that maybe that list of mandatory events should be somewhere outside of the main body of the policy, so we can change it on an annual basis if needed. A little bit easier.
Marlene?
Thank you, through the chair. As a policy, the entire policy would be up for review if the body of the policy included this type of information, as opposed to just an appendix. So it would be at this council's discretion whether or not they wanted to make the distinction. And administration's happy to bring forward that amendment to, if committee chooses to approve with direction, we can bring that forward to council as an appendix item. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other question? Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, this is for Arlene. It's just more a little bit, I would think, some change here on item number 5 in mandatory events. It's called the Combative Sports Conference, but the actual name of that would be the Association of Boxing Commissions Conference.
Okay.
So we want to get down and split in hairs, but that is the name of the conference. And I also want to just touch on the Alberta Bilingual Municipalities Association. We usually meet over the phone and discuss that, but once a year they do have and ours is at the end of this month here, where they have a one-day meeting. So I don't know if you want to include that, but that is a mandatory thing that I would be going to. But we're kind of a cheap organization where we do a lot of teleconferencing, and this one here is going to be scheduled for at the end of this month. It's the Alberta Bilingual Municipalities Association. So I don't know how you want to include that, but or do we even want to add that to the list?
Arlene?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administration is happy to put this into the appendix as an item, and then once again, it is up to council to have that discussion and debate and approve accordingly. So as a council member, you're welcome to make the suggestions, and then it'll be your peers as well as yourself that will vote through the policy as approved. So
Thank you.
I'll take that direction away, and I can add it within the appendix, bringing it forward to council, and then it will be your council that will vote it in.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Just wanted to address it. That's all.
That's it. So any other question, Dylan?
Well, and I wonder that's actually something that I've been thinking through on this, is in terms of how we treat things that are parts of boards that we're appointed to. Where should we be adding that specific event to this, or should we be adding, if there's a mandatory event for a board you're appointed to, that becomes mandatory? So a good example is, in a couple of weeks, I have to travel up to Peace River for Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance meeting. That's certainly not a meeting that I'd ever go to if on my own volition, but you folks appointed me to serve, to represent you on that board. And so by all means, I'm happy to go do my job because you appointed me to it. I don't know if that should be considered an optional event. And I think the way I'm reading this policy, that might be an optional event. So am I just misreading the policy, or?
Arlene? Bill, go ahead.
Oh, I'll leave it to the clerk to do the interpretation.
Thank you, through the chair. I think this may be a gap in the policy. So this may be something that council may wish to have more clarity around. So within the general provisions of what your annual salary and benefits are paid for, it is specific that boards, commissions, and committees as appointed within the local region apply to your to the annual salary and benefits of an elected official. But I think you're correct, Councillor Bressie. I think there may be a gap in how to address those boards, commissions, and committees that members are appointed to outside of the local region.
Well, and just to clarify that, I think there might also be a separate conversation about per diems versus expenses, where I think it might be reasonable for council to say, well, hey, we appoint you to that committee just like we appoint others, so you're not eligible for a per diem. Maybe might be reasonable, but I don't think it'd be reasonable for a council to say, well, it's out of your discretionary budget for gas to get there.
Okay, Arlene, yeah. Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate Arlene's suggestion that may be a gap. One way to potentially handle it would be under the general provisions portion. Taking some language out of the general provisions portion and putting it into per diems, where it says, if we go down to the per diem section, it says a per diem shall be paid to the mayor and councillors to attend an approved event or board, commission, and committee as appointed outside of the local region. So kind of taking some of that similar language that's used up higher and popping it into the per diem section, so it basically makes it clear that, and again, if this is council's intent, that if you are appointed to a committee that meets, a distance away outside of the local region, that you are entitled to claim per diems for attending that committee, which has been, I think, our practice in the past. And so, if we want to make sure that our current practice is reflected well in this policy, I think that would be a good change. And I would support that kind of change. I don't know how others feel about it.
Okay, sounds good. Any other question on this policy? If not, do we need the motion on this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I see Councillor Friesen. Yeah, Mr. Chair, we certainly do. We need to recommend it forward to council for ultimate approval. I wonder if we should, so I'll make two small ones, and then I'll leave it to somebody else to make the motion to refer it forward if they wanted to. I'd move that committee direct administration reflect the mandatory events section as a schedule to the policy, and that administration provide clarifying language with respect to per diems for boards, commissions, and committees as appointed that meet outside the local region. So those two items that we just kind of talked about the mandatory events being a separate schedule, so council could deal with that schedule from time to time, and providing additional clarity on this point around per diems, whether external agencies, boards, and commissions that council members are appointed to that meet outside the local region, whether they can claim a per diem. And so I think, I don't have the specific words on each of those. I think administration has heard them. I'm really confident that they'll be able to reflect it well in the policy. But my motion is just directing administration to make those changes. And then if somebody else wanted to refer the as amended policy forward to council, I think that would be the other motion we'd need if this one passes.
Anything we needed to change on the mayor's motion? I got a question on just curiosity. Is Peace River is it local or is outside local counts? Really? If you go to Peace River, that's local, you call it? Or?
So through the chair, the Peace River community would be outside the 50-kilometer radius of the local region. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So motion is on the table. Any changes or edit or anything we needed to? If it's not, then all in favor? Motion carries. With that, we've done our business today, but then outstanding items. Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I think we need to refer this forward.
Forward to, okay, go ahead, Eunice.
Thank you. So I'll make the motion to refer the policy to as amended to council.
Oh, thank you. Motion on table. All in favor? Thank you, Mayor, given to updating this. Now we got left outstanding items, and which is, I think Shane did a good job. We don't have any more. So, we need the motion for update. Kevin, go ahead.
We have no items on the outstanding items list, but I make a motion to approve it.
All right, motion.
The review.
Alrighty. All in favor? Motion carries. With that, I think corporate committee meeting agenda is done, and next one is, I think, community services.
I believe so. So now just let me get X out of my, there we go. So I'll call to order the Community Services Committee, and members here are Councillors Clayton and Palat and Mayor Given. Councillor Palat is away today, so it's just the three of us. So let's begin with the Director's Area Update, which I understand is coming from Stephanie today.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Friesen. So for the Community Knowledge Campus, the Grande Prairie Outdoor Pool is doing very well. So the leadership team there has been able to increase the cohort capacity to allow 35 patrons per booking. So that's exciting. All bookings are sold out for the remainder of the summer season. So waitlisted families are currently being contacted in the event that there is a cancellation that occurs. So trying to maximize those opportunities. And the partnership with Big Brothers and Big Sisters is going very well. As we had talked about utilization for the pool, at the end of the third week, 307 summer passes had been sold, and the utilization rate of that is about 36%, so very close to what the projection was. The Grande Prairie Public Library Express service is also going very well. They've progressed to opening access to computers in the library by appointment, so they're definitely pleased to be able to offer that kind of access and technology to the community. Revolution Place experienced a ticketing system upgrade recently, and that enhances the mobile functionality of the ticketing system and adds some new marketing and cross-promotional features to users. From Corporate Facilities Management, they have had a startup meeting with the consultant for the chlorination system replacement project at the Eastlink Center. So that's very exciting. The team is also finalizing the design specifications for the ice plant replacement at the Curling Center, and they are currently reviewing recommendations for the retro commissioning sites report and developing an implementation plan for that. So as a result also of an idea that was brought forward by Mayor Given, the city and local RCMP are partnering with Volunteer Alberta to pay the administrative costs of vulnerable sector checks for volunteers in positions and organizations that have been approved by Volunteer Alberta. So more information will be released in that regard later this afternoon. So that's very exciting. For transit, the department received 300,000 masks from the province for transit use. So they were received in bulk and are being repackaged from various community services departments, and also volunteers from the Alliance Church have been assisting with that. The GPREP coordinator was able to connect transit with the pastor of the church there. So it's a great community partnership that we've been able to utilize. And transit leadership is also in consultation with staff from the college and both school districts, hoping to begin conversations and understand the plans for September so that we're able to match transit demand with the appropriate level of service. And that completes the director's update.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Catley? I see that Councillor Clayton has a question. Go ahead, Clayton.
Thanks, Councillor Friesen. Two questions. The first one in regards to the outdoor pool activity. Has there been any consideration given for extending the hours of use in order to be able to facilitate more users at the outdoor pool?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Clayton. There hasn't as yet, as we're trying to manage the current bookings and usage within our existing staff complement that we have at the moment. However, we are bringing forward a bylaw amendment later in this meeting that has potentially will offer, if approved, some creative opportunities for pool use at the facility to complement the demand for the outdoor pool.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll save my other questions for that part of the meeting, but my other one, if that's okay, Chair Friesen. Can you give me an update on the status of the council-approved renovations at Revolution Place? There was a bucket of money that had been prior approved in regards to some renovations, and I'm just wondering, have they been tendered? Have they been started? Can you give me an update on where those are at?
Absolutely, through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Clayton. Those renovations have not been initiated yet, as any of the planned renovations would need to be redone or revamped if the decision was made to do a larger renovation or to, as discussed at the last CCW meeting. So in an effort to kind of use city resources and taxpayer resources in the best way possible, those renovations have not yet proceeded.
Okay, so I guess I have a bit of a concern with that. I mean, we approved and allocated money that we wanted the work done potentially during COVID when times were slower and there wasn't large-scale events happening at the facility. And now we're not doing those even though that money's been approved and the projects have been approved. So if the Revolution Place facility upgrades that are going to budget change or modify or don't get approved, the things that were already approved won't get done this year. Is that correct?
Ms. Cashley?
Through the chair, it certainly would give us a shorter time frame to implement things. Certainly, if the direction was to have those projects initiated right in away, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it defeats the purpose of the whole conversation that we had in May in regards to getting those things done this summer, potentially to create an uptake in economy through trades that were looking for work, through, times of lack of events in the facilities. So basically that's not happening.
Ms. Cashley?
Through the chair, those projects have not been initiated to date, no.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Clayton, and I see that Councillor Blackburn has a question.
Thank you. It's just my recollection, Ms. Casually, that when we talked about the larger renovation, we were told that I think we were told that the projects that were already approved would there would be no conflict between the two kinds of operations in terms of being able to do the one renovation even if the other one eventually does get approved. So I was kind of surprised to hear that we're not going ahead already.
Ms. Casually, I'm not sure if there's much you can add further than what you've already said, but go ahead.
Through the chair, I can certainly take this feedback back to the team and we'll begin moving forward on that for sure.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Thank you, Ms. Casually. I recall as well, there was a lot of talk about throwaway costs, and we were assured that, that's my recollection as well, that the renos that were approved could go ahead without really what happens in the fall having any bearing on this project. Thanks. Any other questions for Ms. Cajolet? Councillor Clayton?
Thanks, Chair Friesen. I guess just so we're we're all on the same page leaving this discussion. So Ms. Cajolet, you will bring back an update to the next standing committee meeting in regards to the items that are able to happen without impact on the potential bigger project, or where are we leaving this at today?
Yes, certainly through the chair. Certainly I can provide an update. I'll work with procurement. I don't know that I'll have anything significant to report in 2 weeks' time for the next meeting, but certainly, if not, give a little bit of an update in the director's report and then bring that back to the next soonest meeting possible.
Thank you. All right, you've flipped around on my screen now, so I'm a little off, but I think that was it for questions. Thank you. Then we'll move on, and my computer's gone off. Here we go. So we're next going to hear from Ms. Bilodeau regarding the Revolution Place Revitalization Engagement, Public Engagement Plan. Ms. Bilodeau?
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Friesen. So this report is being presented today in response to Council's request for public engagement concerning the options presented for Revolution Place renovations on July 14th at Council Committee of the Whole. Please note that there was an error in the report which incorrectly indicated this meeting took place on July 17th. Administration has selected a key set of tactics which take into consideration the points in the process in which public engagement is being sought, the limitations imposed by COVID-19 and the scale of the proposed project. They also present a mixed spectrum of participation levels for residents and key stakeholders, beginning with informing them and ultimately ending with involving stakeholders in the decision-making process by ensuring their contributions will influence the final decision of council during budget deliberations this fall. Should council decide to proceed with renovations at that time, additional engagement is recommended. The engagement plan presented is not intended to advocate for any particular interest or project outcome, but rather a process to gain an understanding of public sentiment towards the proposed renovation options. As an initial step, administration proposes to launch into a public awareness and education campaign that will provide the public with balanced and objective information to assist them in understanding the project and its potential impact. And to ensure this, they have a clear understanding of the scope of the decision. This campaign will be initiated on August 17th and run until September 4th, and will primarily consist of high visibility, high impact awareness materials circulated throughout the community, and utilization of the City of Grande Prairie's online engagement platform, engage.cityofgp.com. The awareness campaign will be followed by a survey blitz running September 8th to the 28th for the purpose of collecting public input to identify issues, develop possible decision criteria, and generate potential project alternatives. This stage of the engagement will establish the key themes of usage of space, features, funding, and support for or against the recommended options, and primarily consists of a telephone survey conducted by a third-party polling firm, online surveys and full and shortened forms, and stakeholder consultations with targeted user groups. The final stage proposed for the collecting of public feedback is an open house running over the course of September 21st to the 27th. The open house will integrate the public input collected during the previous stages of public engagement and will present facility plans, renderings, limitations, and financial impacts to the city and tax base. And it will also include a feedback mechanism to assist the public in answering if they are in favor of proceeding with any of the proposed renovation plans. Results from this full engagement process will then be brought before committee in advance of the budget deliberations this fall. So the anticipated financial impact of the proposed engagement plan will fall under previously budgeted line items, including utilizing remaining polling funds to a maximum of $10,000, and covering print, radio, and online material and advertising costs through dedicated engagement and marketing funds to a maximum of $4,500. As Revolution Place is a key piece of social infrastructure within the city, administration believes that these costs are appropriately correlated to the potential impacts of the project on residents and stakeholders. So in closing, administration believes that meaningful participation by the public over the course of the proposed engagement plan will ultimately lead to a decision that reflects the interests and concerns of those who stand to be affected by the project. Thank you, and I'm open to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Bilodeau? Okay, so I just want to, Candace, it's the engagement, the initial engagement is to see what the public would like to have, where they'd like to see the Revolution Place go forward. And then the open house will include the summary of those recommendations, or that input, sorry, and we'll have then the recommendation along with a budget that the community can then give input at the open house or thereafter on whether or not they'd like to see that plan go forward.
Thank you, Chair Friesen. Yes, that is correct.
All right, thank you. Then if there are no questions, any motion arising here? Mayor Gibbons?
Yeah, thanks very much. Appreciate the work of the admin team. I think this is a really solid plan and appreciate that built around the IAP 2A approach. So I move the committee direct administration move forward with Revolution Place public engagement plan as presented.
All right. Any debate on that? All in favor? And that passes. Thank you. All right, then we are back to Ms. Cajolet, and this will be a verbal update on community group emergency funding. Ms. Cajolet?
Thank you, Councillor Friesen. And this item is on the outstanding items list for a report to come back in a couple of weeks, but we were able to get some information earlier than that, so I would like to share that with you. In consultation with financial services and corporate services, we have been able to identify two possible funding sources for emergency community group funding. So our current policy has always established a process for that. There is just no budget allocated for it. So the two options suggested would be there is money in Council Strategic Initiatives Fund that has not yet been allocated. It's approximately $100,000. The other option would be that Council could utilize the unallocated funds within the Future Expenditures Reserve for the purposes of providing emergency community group funding to applicants.
All right, thank you. I see that Councillor Blackburn has a question, and then Councillor Bresky.
Thank you, Councillor Friesen. I guess my question regarding the emergency funding has less to do with the source of the funding than timing and so on. But I will say that I think that the ideas for the sourcing of funds is an acceptable one, and I hope that the committee would approve that if it's necessary. So in terms of timing, these are emergency requests, and it seems to be taking a long time to respond to an emergency request. So I'm wondering a little bit about how we're going to ensure that those people or those organizations that need this kind of funding know that they can request it, and whether or not there will be a deadline, and when it is that we might actually get those funds dispersed. And I'm hoping that it's sooner rather than later.
through the chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. So the request for emergency funding has always existed through the policy. Certainly in light of the current happenings, we've formalized the application process for that this year to provide a really quick mechanism for groups. So as part of the funding request, when the amount of funding is requested, the community group is also asked to identify the timeline that it would be appropriate for them for distribution of the funds. So the options currently are immediate, 3 months, and 6 months. So we certainly would work with them to respond to them as quickly as possible based on what they've selected. So if this is approved by council, then certainly the funds could be distributed right away.
Thank you. If I can just follow up, the request that came from the theater, I'm not sure what their timeline was for that, but I think that our reason for not responding right away had to do with whether or not there would be a lot of requests and whether or not we had enough funds to be able to say yes to one group before we knew how many other requests we might get. So with the kind of funding that is being recommended, funding sources, are we in a position then where we could respond to the requests that we've received so far?
Ms. Cashel?
Through the chair, thank you. Certainly the Live Theatre Society indicated that their time frame would be about 3 months. So we're sitting at just about a month currently. So certainly I think would be within the time frame that they indicated. There would be, I expect that there would be sufficient funds based on the requests that we've received. So far, just this one. There was discussion that others might bring forward, but nothing has been submitted formally to the department yet.
Thank you. And then I think Councillor Bresky, I thought I maybe saw your hand flash.
Yeah, I was going to ask about process too. Specifically, I was going to ask. So the Wolverines was one that I was thinking about, where it sounded like they were making emergency funding, and when they talked about community group funding, and if I'm recalling, part of the conversation was, hey, we should refer them. That sounds like more an emergency request, but they haven't made a formal application for emergency funding, and has anybody followed up with them? Just, are the Wolverines in the process at all?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Bresky. No, we have not received an application from them yet.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mayor Given, you had a question?
Yeah, and this actually maybe is more for the city manager than for Ms. Cashel. I just wonder if we have an ability, I'm looking forward to the outstanding items list, and I see that there's a report expected at the end of September on COVID-19 community group funding requests. And I just wonder if the admin team could deal with this issue in a similar sort of manner that we dealt with, property tax deferrals. I appreciate that it was a lot of work and it was stressful and difficult for management, undoubtedly. But there was this real sense of urgency to deal with that issue. Certainly we had legislative timelines that we're running up against, but management dealt with a really, really big issue in a very short period of time. I guess I'm a bit concerned that it feels to me like this request for a report or for a process is being dealt with more like typical city business. I have a real sense of urgency around the needs of the community groups. There's some that are, in an existential crisis, whether they exist or not. And so I wonder if it's possible for us to treat this item a little bit more like we've treated some of the other COVID items, where we sort of say, all hands on deck, we need to get something out the door, we need to get it out the door quickly, maybe not necessarily perfectly, but as best as possible. So, Horacio, do you think that that's possible around this item? Because I hear council members talking about individual groups and specific amounts and everything else, but what we really need is a process. How quickly could administration put together a process for us that would handle these things?
Thank you, Mr. Glenn.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, for sure we can discuss the situation on Thursday, our CLT meeting, and come up with a plan, perhaps to address the issue at the next committee meeting. We are really analyzing the stimulus plan and the operating potential funding from the province. So there will be some financial analysis to be done during this week at CLT, and we can put together some ideas to resolve this matter probably in a 2-week time, because there will be funding. There's funding involved on this.
Yeah, Madam Chair. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Horacio. And yeah, CLT could come back with some recommendations. And again, if it isn't a polished, complete program all the way out and through, but at least is the start, sort of a rapid development of, okay, how would we even find out what community groups are in need? How would we let them know that we're even asking that question? That initial stage starting now, my concern, again, looking at that report date at the end of September would be that would tell us about a process that would have a number of weeks following it, and then all of a sudden we're into November or December again before we actually get a chance to close some of this out. I think we kind of need to follow the lead of the provincial and federal governments here, where they've been announcing programs pretty rapid fire. And some of them had their imperfections, absolutely, but I think the intent was to get the money out the door where there was a defined need. So if we can sort of follow that approach, I would at least like to have an opportunity for council to consider that, rather than it being October by the time council sees a process.
Yep, no problem. We will expedite this matter as soon as we can.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, then we will move on to the bylaw amendment for Eastlink Centre and the Grande Prairie Outdoor Pool. Ms. Tashlet?
Thank you, Councillor Friesen. So there is presenting a amending bylaw for C1425A. So as part of the relaunch strategy, certainly there are some guidance requirements that need to be followed from the province, but the leadership team across the CKC campus has come up with an opportunity to be able to offer more services within the current staffing complement. So close monitoring of the demand and activities usage of the outdoor pool has the leadership team at the campus has definitely thought of some creative opportunities for the community. So as we expected, the outdoor pool has certainly been popular, and it has developed some wait lists. So this bylaw amendment is an opportunity to rent the leisure aquatic amenities at CKC so that waitlisted guests for the outdoor pool would be able to be given priority to choose to book the indoor sort of alternative prime space. So the options within the bylaw offer some bookable spaces as well as some add-on amenities pricings for families and guests to basically be able to choose their own type of adventure. So I think certainly if we progress to stage 3, this is something that the Eastlink Centre would likely not be able to facilitate, but right now it's certainly a great opportunity for cohort families to enjoy. So the pricing model in the bylaw amendment would be available as bookable space, same idea as the outdoor pool, and then the add-ons so that staffing can be scheduled appropriately and efficiently. So they are not part of the current summer swim pass because modifications to the scheduling would need to be done to accommodate the daily booked time slots and shifting aquatic staff throughout the pool areas. So although although we haven't listed pricing for hot tubs, they are still currently in stage 3 of the relaunch plan. So without any direction right now as to what that stage may look like, the leadership team wanted to bring this forward as an opportunity in case there is opportunity to utilize that in the future, but those facilities are not able to be utilized right away. One of the additional fitness center pricing options would be also to expand for the future. So that is certainly intended to support the certified internal fitness instructors and personal trainers across the campus. So should some of the current restrictions take us into the fall, or when the colder winter weather arrives and the outdoor temperatures don't allow the ability to offer outside classes, then this sort of selective alternative pricing could be implemented, and with the utilizing the concourse space. So allowing these additional pricing amendments to bylaw C 1425A allows the campus the opportunity to provide the community with some additional amenity options, and then still balancing the fiscal responsibilities that are required of the organization and the ability to follow the provincial guidelines.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Cazalet? Mayor Given, and then Councillor Bessie.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I just wonder, Stephanie, had administration considered the flow rider as a bookable feature for longer sessions? It just sort of stood out to me that it was about the only component of the facility that wasn't available as an add-on or as a individual booking.
Thank you to the chair. Mayor Given, certainly that particular aquatics or water facility is not available right now. Would be considered part of the stage 3 of the plan. So they have not included that yet, but we could certainly look at that in the future.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Bessie?
Just a thought for committee. I'm not sure if people would be interested in this, but it just seems kind of silly to me that we're talking about all these fees, and I think we're going to be having these. I have a sense that we'll probably be making adjustments as COVID-19 happens, and I wonder if there might be any interest in delegating to administration the ability just to make these changes as we're figuring out how to adapt to these stages reopening, where I don't know if I want us to go through a whole bylaw process every time we tweak something at the Eastlink Center just because of changing COVID-19 needs.
Thank you, Councillor Bessie. That's an intriguing idea. Mayor Given?
Yeah, I would agree with that concept, and I thought we kind of had discussed that a little bit before when we talked about administration's ability to have the flexibility to change these when we started the discussion on the outdoor pool. So I'm happy to approve as many bylaw amendments and changes as needed, but it does seem cumbersome, and I wonder if we could, could administration see a way that we could give you one approval to make those changes on the fly and just keep us updated? And is there a reason why we haven't proposed that to this stage?
Thank you, Mayor Given. So is that a question perhaps for Ms. Cazalet? Can you answer that, or does it need to be directed elsewhere?
Thank you, through the chair. I can answer part of it for sure, and then I think we'll refer to legislative services. So certainly the initial bylaw amendments that came forward for the creation of the summer pass, because we have membership rates within the current city fees, rates, and charges bylaw, it needed to follow the procedure for amending those and creating a new rate. So my understanding is that these amendments follow the same need from a governance perspective, but I would certainly defer to legislative services for comment or direction on that.
Thank you. Ms. Karbuszewski, would you be able to answer that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Any amendments to bylaw or any proposed draft bylaw do have to follow the specified process for making any changes. And with regard to this specific bylaw, it would have amendments that would come through council for 3 readings and be voted on to be approved. And then the bylaw would stand with its amendments as passed.
Thank you. Mayor Given, I think you're probably going to ask the same question that's in my head. Go ahead.
Well, no, I also saw Councillor Blackburn. I don't know if I was in the queue ahead of him or after. I was ahead? Okay. So I wonder, Arlene, would it be possible for council to pass an amendment to this bylaw that said something like, council has provided authority to administration to adapt and change prices at the outdoor pool and Eastlink Center as needed, and maybe defining a period of time, up until December 31st, 2020, rather than specifying each individual piece and price and size of booking and time and everything. Would it be possible for us to amend the bylaw once in a way that where council is explicitly delegating some authority to administration?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Council has the authority to delegate certain actions to administration through bylaw. Those actions must not remove the rights of council that are provided in the MGA. Establishing rates and charges for services, I believe is, before I set this in stone, this would be something administration needs to clarify in the MGA to ensure we are not removing the right of council. But I do believe that that may be a possibility. Administration will have to look into it to make sure that we don't step on council's authority.
Thank you, Ms. Karbuszewski. Do you have any follow-up with that, Mayor Given, or we'll go to Councillor Blackburn then?
Thank you. Mayor Given asked the question that I was going to ask, and the only suggestion that I would make is that if it's necessary to ensure that council is not going to have their toes stepped upon, perhaps the provision would put a range of dollar amounts into it to say that such and such may happen, provided that the change does not exceed X number of dollars. So that would give us at least, or give administration at least a little bit of leeway that seems to have been approved by council.
Thank you. So I think that was an observation rather than a question or perhaps a suggestion. All right, any other questions for Ms. Cajolet? I see Councillor Minhas and then Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair Eunice. This is just clarification, like when they say it's $100 per booking, is it a limit of the people there when they book it, or is it just for the family, or how does it work that the way bylaw saying right now?
Thank you. Ms. Cajolet?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the bookings would be for cohort bookings, so the same way that they're done through the outdoor pool. So it would be up to 35 people in a cohort.
So they can book longer hours than 60 minutes, or just have to be 1 hour and then they have to go?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The bookings would be 60-minute time slots, so they could certainly book 2 60-minute slots if they wanted to, but the idea of having the 1 hour booking is certainly to assess the demand for it, and also to ensure that as many families that are interested are able to take advantage of the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clayton?
Thanks, Chair Friesen. I was wondering, Ms. Casulet, can you expand on the intent of item, I guess it would be item I, so adding 5A as follows in the draft there. Can you expand on the intent there?
Ms. Casulet?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. So based on the demand, the pool has been able to create some opportunities for a smaller booking at a reduced fee that will still allow them staff time to follow the provincial protocols in terms of sanitization and things between bookings.
So you're doing some half-hour bookings for a reduced fee, still with the cohort number of 35. That's sitting in the identified schedule as it currently is?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so based on my other question during your director's update, how big is our wait list? And because I am hearing some feedback, obviously the intent of the pool was to get as many people in it as possible. That's currently not possible. But how big is the wait list, and what are the opportunities for us to expand the schedule, particularly in the outdoor pool, which we all know has a very short season. The current schedule, I don't recall from the original report what that looks like in regards to the day, if it's 9 to 5, I don't recall. But what are the opportunities to expand that, and how big is the current wait list?
Thank you, Ms. Casulet.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the current wait list is just over 100 people. So we are certainly looking at extending the usage of the pool, outdoor pool, as far into the month of September as we can.
Okay, so that's 100 groups of 35. So there's 3,500 people that want to still get into the pool that haven't had the opportunity.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the booking is based on the hour. So as long as the booking is paid, it could be a cohort of 10 people that are attending, or it could be a cohort of up to 35 that are attending. So I don't have a sense of number of individuals. I think that
but it's 100 bookings.
That is my understanding. I can clarify with the aquatics team.
And right now, do you recall, Ms. Casulet, what are the hours? Like, is there any opportunity to add an hour in the end of the day? We all know we have long summers. We've had, it's warm in Grande Prairie right now, and I'm just wondering, it would be sad if there are, still at the end of summer and still a wait list of 100 groups that want to get into the pool. And if we simply can, I know there's people looking for more hours in their jobs, looking to raise more money for their own families. Have we looked at expanding our staffing schedules?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Clayton. So the current hours of operation are 10 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. and that's 7 days a week. So I think one of the challenges with the booked space is that certainly we're in a position where some users or folks that have booked space have been afforded more than one booking, and just because they've booked multiple sessions at one time. So I, short of saying it was first come, first serve or one person per booking until everybody had an opportunity, that could certainly be an option that we could look at for future situations.
I mean, it sort of comes back to the earlier discussion of how much council wants to be involved in the micromanaging this project, and I agree that maybe it gets to a point where we have not a lot of discussion on this. However, that to me, is an opportunity. If, like you say, if there are people doing multiple bookings, or there are people that are have had an opportunity to book the pool numerous times compared to a wait list of people that may never get in this summer. So just, some consideration to be given to, people that are on the wait list that may never get on, and that we're being fair to people that may be abusing the system, or sorry, that we be fair to people that aren't abusing the system, and monitor people that may be abusing the system. Because in my opinion, the pool was, built for a reprieve from the sun, but to service as many people as possible in the short summer period that we do have. So if some consideration could be given to that, to get as many people into the pool as possible, in my opinion, that would be important. Thanks.
Thanks, Clerk Clayton. And I'll just add to that, the hours are great, and there's probably not much more you can add to that, but has it been considered at all to do evening parties? And I say this because there are some groups that may really enjoy that. I remember a teenager swimming in the pool, and it was like this special evening event, and it got dark. Like, it was pretty cool. So there are cohorts perhaps that would be a good time for them as well. So I just encourage administration potentially to think about opening up some evening parties as well, maybe not into September, but just to alleviate some of those remaining outstanding waitlists listed families or cohorts. Any other questions or recommendation? Okay, Mayor Gibbon?
Yeah, so I'm really interested in this idea of, so I'm happy to pass this today. I mean, if but I would prefer that we provided, Councillor Clayton, I think your mic is still open. I would much prefer to provide administration more flexibility, so they can be more responsive and adaptive, in terms of hours and fees and everything else. And I would prefer to pass that bylaw change than to do this one that actually starts to make the bylaw longer and longer and longer and longer. I think that this could be a bylaw that is pretty simple, and I don't. So I'm curious about. I'd like to hear some advice from administration on how we could do that, because we don't obviously. I don't want to be drafting a bylaw on the fly. I have a suggestion that might work. I'd like to see administration think about that, and it would be great if on Monday of next week, Council could approve a bylaw that gives administration more flexibility so that they can make these changes rapidly. I could imagine something along the lines of amending this bylaw to say, to remove all the specifics about costs and everything else, to say something like this, if it was within the MGA, that Council hereby delegates fee-setting authority for the Eastlink Centre and Grande Prairie Outdoor Pool to administration, subject to the following conditions: that the fees not exceed those set in fees and charges bylaw and the overall one, that Council and the public be informed prior to implementation of any changes to fees, and that the delegation of this authority be reconsidered by Council no later than December 31st, 2020. So, I would be comfortable with giving administration that really broad latitude that says, don't charge more than we previously approved in the fees and charges bylaw. You shouldn't be trying to make extra money off of this. You have to tell us and tell the public when you're changing this. And this isn't a set it and forget it. You get this authority forever. This is a limited time authority that Council would reconsider, no later than December 31st. If we needed to maintain that delegation of authority, we could choose to do that. If we wanted to take back that authority, we could do it. And again, maybe it's November 1st, 2020. It doesn't really matter the specific date to me, but just that idea that we set it, we amend this bylaw to say, look, we're giving you all this authority. We did that explicitly and intentionally, so we're not cutting off our ability to do something. We've done it. It was an explicit choice. And we're going to reconsider that at a specific time. But other than that, as long as you're not trying to make extra money off everybody, you have the authority to make the changes you need as quickly as you need to do. So I see the city manager kind of nodding. I would love to approve that bylaw on Monday rather than the one that's presented here.
So I did see Ms. Cazalet raise her hand as well, but I can see that Mr. Galanty's chomping at the bit to get in. So please, Mr. Galanty.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just a quick comment. As Arlene mentioned, of course, if there is an increase on revenue on the fee, yes, that has to be approved by council by law. But in terms of flexibility for hours of operation or to adding or adjusting different services within the umbrella of the fees and charges bylaw, we will be able to do that. So give us a couple of days to figure out the best way to present this on Monday to council, and I'm confident we can find a way to write that in the bylaw, so we have flexibility to adjust that as needed.
Thank you. And Ms. Cajolet, did you want to get in as well?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, nothing further, Chair.
All right, then I guess I'm looking for a motion. Mayor Gibbons.
Yeah, so I'll try one here. Oh, I see Councillor Clayton. There's a waving as well before I made the motion.
Oh, Councillor Clayton.
I can wait till your motion and then we can discuss it as part of the motion.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I would move that committee direct administration prepare an amendment to bylaw C 1425 to enable council to delegate rate setting authority for the Eastlink Center and Grande Prairie Outdoor Pool to administration for a limited period of time. So my motion isn't actually the changes to the bylaw. My motion is telling administration to figure out a way for us to do that. And sorry, I'll add this to my motion. Sorry, Amanda. And to bring forward a recommendation to the next council meeting. Period. So my motion is saying administration go and figure something out for how we can do this and bring that back to our next council meeting. My motion is explicit that our intent is to delegate that authority to administration for those two facilities only, and that we're delegating, and the intent of this would be to only delegate that authority for a specified period of time. And so, so if council or the committee members are interested in seeing what that could look like, then you would support this motion. Administration would do that work, and then they would come back to us with a proposed amendment to the bylaw that we could all discuss and debate at the council meeting.
Great, thank you. Councillor Clayton, for discussion regarding the motion.
Thanks, Chair Friesen. Yeah, I'll support this motion as stated. I guess I thought the mayor though had intent of more than just rate setting. Did you not, Mayor Gibbon, or you strictly just want to pass on the authority of rate setting?
Well, I'm taking a pretty broad definition of rate setting. Here, they're proposing different rates for different components, which wasn't contemplated in the fees and charges bylaw. I think that that's a part of rate setting. Yeah, and I guess I just want to make sure. Yeah, and also I guess I support the rate setting. I also wonder hours of operation. I'm fine with that as well. Where it gets into an area where I think it would be better for council discussion is if and when we discuss the numbers in a cohort group, what the definition of that is, when phase 3 comes in, that stuff I think is a public discussion with council. So based on it being rates and fees, yeah, that's a no-brainer for me. Makes sense. Yeah. For me, rates and fees and hours of operation would be. I think hours of operation are already a management choice within management authority. This is being specific to the rates and fees.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Then call to question the motion to allow the authority to give administration the authority. Bring back something for us to look at next council meeting. All in favor? Great, that passes. Now, because we don't know whether that will pass or not, I am looking for potentially a motion here on what was presented today, the bylaw C 1425A, so that whether or not this, we pass the, a new bylaw that gives that delegates authority, at least we have this. Is that fair? So motion then.
Sure.
Mayor.
Sure, I think I've got a way to do that. So I've moved the committee further direct administration to bring forward the attached proposed changes to bylaw C 1425 for council consideration at that same council meeting. So it's almost like a second part of my first motion. So we're saying, please do this other change, but also bring this forward so we can consider the two different ideas at the same time.
Thank you. Any discussion regarding that? Continuance of the motion? All right, then all in favor? Great, thank you. And that brings us to our outstanding items list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm assuming the item number 1099 we may revisit that list depending on what comes forward next week. So we'll leave that as is for now. Item 1094 would be complete. That CCW meeting did take place. For item number 1084, the report related to the South Peace Regional Archives, we would just like to change the expected report date to September 29th of 2020. Still working on this one. For item 1070, community group funding policy review, and item 1096, administration would recommend that we combine those two ID numbers. They are essentially the same item, and just one was referred from the CCW meeting. Item 1071 is now complete following the last CCW meeting, and item 1095 is on track for the report to come forward on at the next committee meeting.
All right, any questions? If not, motion to receive as amended. Councillor Clayton?
So moved.
All right, and all in favor? Thank you. That concludes the business of the community services meeting. Thank you very much.
Great. And then our final meeting of the day is Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee. The voting members on this are myself, Councillor Clayton, and Mayor Given. And we're actually going to start off with an in-camera conversation. And administration, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe how this will work is if a motion passes, then those who need to be part of that conversation will go on to a separate Zoom call, have the in-camera conversation, then pop back over to this Zoom call. You can never know with this council, but I don't think it will be a terribly long conversation we're going to have in camera, but who knows? So I think that's how it's going to work. Is there a committee member who'd be willing to make a motion to go in camera? Councillor Clayton?
So moved.
All in favor? Great. And before we pop over, I know that's something maybe we've been a little bit sloppy with in our FOIP is, as we've gone on Zoom, that maybe we shouldn't be, I'm just realizing, is first of all, the reason we're going in camera is for intergovernmental relations. And also, do we need to name the people that are going in camera with us that are on top of council?
Actually, Councillor Gillespie, I believe they've removed that requirement.
Okay.
We don't need to actually name everybody anymore.
Okay, great. Just for my own curiosity, is that something that's permanently been removed, or that's been one of the ministerial regulations just as we're dealing with COVID?
No, I believe it was permanently removed not too long before COVID.
Oh, that's disturbing to me, but good to know. Well, in that case, let's go over to our in-camera conversation. So I'll see everybody that's going to be there in a minute. Just give me a countdown.
Please.
Okay, great. Well, let's start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, welcome everybody back to the public portion of our infrastructure and economic development meeting. Thanks for waiting for us. And item 2.1 is our Director Service Area update, and that is with Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair Bressi. We'll start off with economic development. The Business Resiliency Task Force has launched applications for a digital marketing course in partnership with Community Futures in 9-10, where up to 2 participants from each business will participate in a blend of both half and full day workshops over the course of 8 to 10 weeks, beginning in September. This will also include some dedicated time for one-on-one consulting with a technical expert, and it will address some of the specific questions and concerns. The applications for this actually close tomorrow. So if you guys know of anybody who might be interested in this, please do forward it along for their inclusion. As well, the Economic Development Advisory Committee has met and has been meeting in order to bring forward recommendations for the proposed economic recovery program. We're anticipating these are going to come to the next council meeting on August 10th for debate and adoption at council. In energy and environment, we continue to work on the Eastlink combined heat and power project. The expectation right now is that the units are going to arrive in mid-December, and the commissioning of the units for them to be online is expected to be in February. There's currently work that is happening, and there will be work on site as far as tying into the building management system, as well as the existing building components will occur in October and November of this year in advance of the units arriving. In engineering, we posted the Crystal Ridge Road rehab tender as well as the road overlay phase 2 tender. We are also just posted a engineering RFP for 2021 and 2022 for the old Highway 43. We've just recently closed the downtown rehab phase 4 tender. It's not yet been awarded as all of the submissions still have to be fully vetted before we can formally award, but that's expected to be done this week. We've also awarded a traffic noise sound monitoring program for 2020, outfall repairs for both Ivy Lake and Mission Heights, catch basin and manhole repairs in O'Brien Lake, the full depth reclamation program for a number of sites throughout the city, as well as the Smith subdivision engineering RFP. This week, administration's meeting on the money that was announced from the province of roughly $8.2 million, I believe, that's going to be doled out like the gas tax funding to come up with how we're going to address spending all of that money within the time frame and the constraints that are presented. In planning and development, we have launched public engagement for the business licensing bylaw. The survey is open online, and our first open house is scheduled for August 11th at 3:30, and our second is September 9th at 7 o'clock. Both of those are going to be conducted remotely over Zoom platform. In transportation, lots going on, lots of little projects here and there right now. One of the things that has just happened that no one would have known, but the province delisted a portion of Highway 670, so that's 132nd Avenue in the city. So the area that we annexed in 2016 had been under the jurisdiction of the province when it was within the county. They just repaved that portion this summer, but they've also delisted it now where it's no longer a provincial highway, it is now a city road. So in the future, all operations on there being maintenance and capital improvements are now a city responsibility. In parks, the tennis courts at Dave Bar are being turned into community basketball courts. And as well, we just awarded a large tree tender for trees to be planted throughout the city this fall. Not really a specific area that you'll see this. This is throughout the city, replacing trees that have died. And that's my report.
Great. I've got a couple questions. Sorry, before I got in it, does anybody else have any questions? Great. Well, the two questions I had is, can you tell me a little bit more about that traffic noise monitoring thing? I know traffic noise is something that I hear a lot of concern about in the community, so I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, so this is sites throughout the city that we have concerns about the levels of road noise that some of them we monitor on a continuous basis, being, year over year to track changes. Others are reactive to concerns that we or the community may have. So we have added a couple locations this year that we're going to monitor based on some community feedback that we've had. These aren't in relation to things like the train whistle. We know that it's loud, but we don't have jurisdiction to change it. The only way that we could change something like that is to erect fencing throughout the city that met CN's criteria. But in a nutshell, that's what the noise program would do. And then based on the data we get back, there are sometimes opportunities to make improvements or do some awareness or education for the source of the noise, if it's coming from a business practice or something like that.
Great. Then the one other question I had was this delisting of the provincial of a portion of 132nd. Do we have an idea yet of what the operational impact on the city will be?
With them turning it over as a brand new road, there's not going to be a significant amount of maintenance expected on there for a while. The main thing that you're going to see with us is the line painting and snow removal on there. I think on a very, very rough estimate, it was, $50,000-ish a year. And that's not a hard and fast number of what it will look like, but it wasn't dramatic.
Great, thank you. And then Councillor Clayton, did you have a question? And then Mayor Given.
Thanks, Chair Bessie. No, my question was on the noise monitoring that you already brought up. Thanks.
Great, Mayor Given.
Yeah, just on downtown phase 4, I appreciate that there's still evaluation that needs to happen, but I was curious what kind of sense we have about pricing. Was it within budget? Was it well under, way over? Just as a high level, I'm curious about how it looks since we don't open tenders anymore. I feel disconnected from that.
Director Lavin, you're muted.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. Pricing came in under budget, so we have a range of pricing, but it was competitive.
Good, that's great. Look forward to hearing more.
Great. Any other questions? Great. Well, in that case, thank you for the update. We appreciate it. And let's move on to item 2.2, which is an amendment to the traffic bylaw. And if I'm understanding correctly, Mr. Hutchinson is going to be doing the presentation, but if there's questions relating to enforcement, Mr. Kokesh is available to answer those questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for the committee for giving me the opportunity to present this report. As I say, it was prepared in collaboration with engineering and enforcement services. As you say, enforcement services are available if there are specific requirements or questions relating to that component. I actually have a presentation I would like to make that highlights some of the proposed changes. So I will, with your permission, I'd like to share my screen. At this moment in time, I'm unable to do that.
So I don't think that's me that controls that.
Shane, do you have administration rights to share screen?
It should be fine. It should be on your end. You should be able to share.
Now I see that I can share. Okay, so can everybody see the proposed presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay, so as I say, this highlights the proposed changes to the update to the traffic bylaw. Very briefly, I'm going to talk about some changes to the definitions and clauses. I will touch on a new section, Section 82, which relates to enforcement activities. I will refer to some proposed changes to the Schedule 3, which is the truck routes, before moving on to Schedule 4, which is some of the proposed changes for the speed limits. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the stakeholder engagement that we've done as part of this update to the bylaw. before talking on to the next steps. And then, with your permission, I'd like to keep the questions till the end, when both Kelly Kokesh and myself can resolve to any questions relating to this proposed update. So with regards to the changes to definitions and clauses, we noticed a few items for housekeeping to maintain consistency within the bylaw. There was some typos and spelling mistakes in there that we've amended. We've also increased the amount of loaded snow that can be stored on vehicles clearing city streets. There is clarification on the correct way to display a handicap parking permit. We've maintained some consistent language to ensure that travel trailers are in the same definition as recreational vehicles. We identified and amended an error in the wording to allow commercial vehicles in a residential district that allows them to load and unload. We're also allowing for the temporary storage of construction equipment if on city streets, if it's within 100 meters of an area undergoing construction activity. And finally, we're making some recommendations, or what shall I say, we're being specific about if you are parking in designated spots in a city parking lot, that require you display a parking permit, you are now required to display that parking permit. This is only designated areas. With regards to the new section, Section 82, this was added to address behaviours of people knowingly trying to intimidate or interfere with enforcement activities. Now, at present, it's a criminal offence and we have to involve the RCMP, but enforcement services feel that there's no need to elevate this or escalate this to a criminal code, and we feel that many of the issues can be de-escalated and resolved peacefully without involving the RCMP. We would like to emphasise that this doesn't prevent the lawful protest. People can still complain and protest about speeding enforcement or parking enforcement. And I should also emphasise that there is no, the intended purpose of Section 82 is not to make, to pursue people who have unintentionally parked close to an enforcement vehicle. Moving on to Schedule 3, which is the truck routes. I apologise for the condition of this slide, but essentially it is the existing truck route. It shows the city road network as of 2016, and the blue shown here shows the existing truck routes as defined in the existing bylaw. This is the proposed truck route. Essentially what we've done is we've added the new bypass that opened last September as a truck route, and we're proposing to take out the whole of the downtown core. We've also taken out a section of 97th Avenue between Wapiti Road and 116th Street. Again, the emphasis here is if you have legitimate business in an area that isn't on a truck route, you are still allowed to drive that road if you have legitimate business. So the purpose here is really to take out the through traffic from travelling through the downtown core. Another element that I'd like to highlight, and this came up in multiple stakeholder engagements, was that the Truckers Association, when I met with them, and various other bodies, including multiple enforcement services and other city administration departments, have identified a desire to increase the truck route down 116th Street all the way to the correction line. This was also identified in the Transportation Master Plan, and that recommendation will be coming later in August. It isn't shown as an extension of the truck route at this moment in time because the county who have consulted do not support this extension of the truck route. Moving on to Schedule 4 of the speed limits, a little bit of background as to why we're reviewing the speed limits. Essentially, this came out of a review of the schools and playground zones, and we noticed that there is a need for us to do some housekeeping with regards to making sure that the signs and the bylaw comply with each other. We also noticed that there was some inconsistency of the application of design sign standards that we've addressed. We've added the new Highway 43 alignment, and because of the in-service road safety reviews that my team undertake, we've identified some recommendations that would suggest that certain corridors would benefit from having a slower speed limit, in particular Wapiti Road, 100th Avenue and 100th Street. Now, I would like to emphasize that this review of the speed limits is not a comprehensive review of the speed limits that is prepared for a later date. So here we have a map that shows the existing bylaw. Again, I apologize for the lack of clarity on this map. The important things to note here is that anything that's not shown in grey is essentially a speed limit other than 50. All of the green areas are school zones, all the magenta areas are playground zones, and anything in black is a speed limit other than 50. This is the proposed speed limit map. Again, we have the green as school zones, the magenta as playground zones. As part of this review, we've added all new school zones and playground zones that were not constructed in 2016. We've done a bit of tidying up, a bit of housekeeping around certain signs or roads that were not consistent with as they are signed. I'd like to draw your attention to these three corridors, which are essentially Wapiti Road, 100th Avenue, out to the airport and beyond, and around the college, where we're proposing a lower speed limit. Why are we proposing a lower speed limit? Well, as we can see along these corridors, this is a cluster of road traffic collision injuries, and we have a number of intersections along these corridors where we're seeing a high number of injuries. These are actual injuries, it's not property damage only collisions, and in reviewing the collision reports for each of these locations, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that speed is a contributory factor along these corridors. Another slide that I was asked to identify was what is the relationship between speed and collision? And this is a transport research report that shows that speed has a certain collision severity. This is called the flow crash potential index. And by dropping the speed, we can actually drop or reduce the speed of traffic along that speed of the road, but also by dropping the speed, we're reducing the probability of a crash occurring. So that's what's happening here. As these stepped increments in dropped in speed limits, we can reduce the probability of a crash occurring. I was also asked to provide a slide that shows the relationship between speed and severity of collision. Again, this is well researched, well documented. This slide identifies a number of different papers. They all have similar S-curves. Now, this is particularly focused on pedestrian fatality or injury risk, but a similar curve occurs for vehicle occupants, although the curve may have moved a little bit further to the right. Essentially, what we're seeing here is at slower speeds, the crash severity or injury severity is low. At high speeds, we're seeing a lot more injuries, and this is due to the amount of kinetic energy that vehicles have at the point of impact. Another question I was asked to address was what would be the impact on these major arterials if we drop the speed limit? And this is, again, a well-researched speed flow curve that shows that by dropping the speed limit, you can actually increase vehicle volume traveling along a corridor. What we're seeing here is that on busy networks, as we approach congestion, and that's what's happening around here, we can actually get more vehicles per lane along each corridor because of the lower speed limit. What's actually happening there is the headway between vehicles is reduced, so we're getting more bunching up of vehicles, so throughput along that corridor isn't compromised. Another question I was asked is what would be the impact of changing the travel time, changing the speed limits on certain travel times? And this table hopefully addresses some of those points. If we just say that traveling at 70 kilometers per hour, which is 19 meters per second, versus traveling at 60 kilometers per hour at 17 meters per second, if we say the difference, assuming that you could travel that corridor at 70 kilometers per hour, for 1 kilometre, you would be able to cover that distance in 51 seconds. However, if we are dropping the speed, it would take you 9 seconds longer to travel at a slower speed. Another area that I'd like to highlight is that in addition to changing some of the speed limits, I'm making a recommendation that 2 of the playground zones in the city be removed. Now, I should emphasize that these are not currently signed as playground zones, so it's something in the bylaw that we feel should be removed. What are these 2 areas? Well, the first is south of Hillside School, and the west is, and the other one is west of the existing comp. Why should these not be signed as playground zones? Well, essentially what we have here south of Hillside School is we have a large green field. There is no playground equipment at this field. The only playground equipment nearby is actually at the school, and that's covered by the school zone. So that there is a protection area of dropping the speed to 30 kilometers per hour, but the large green field, which is surrounded by a non-traversable fence, and the hockey ring do not constitute a playground. So as it's not signed as a playground, I'd like to take that out of the bylaw. The second area, as I say, is just west of the Comp High School. Again, this has not been signed as a playground zone. This sign shown here is actually the approach to the school zone. All we had there in the past was a non-traversable fence, and we had some baseball diamonds. And again, we don't normally sign these as 30-kilometer zones, which is why it wasn't signed as a 30-kilometer zone. Now, at this moment in time, we have the Comp High School being constructed here. So again, there's no need to keep this in the bylaw as a playground zone. As I mentioned at the beginning, there has been considerable stakeholder engagement with regards to updates to the bylaw. Some of the targeted one-to-one stakeholder meetings that we've held in 2019 and in 2020 have included the province, the Truckers Association, CANFOR, the Emergency Services, the Chamber of Commerce, the college, the school districts, the Urban Development Institute, as well as various city departments. In addition to stakeholder meetings with identified stakeholders, we've also spoken to the public a number of times. Now, some of these have occurred during the update to the Transportation Master Plan. In talking with the public and meeting with the public, I've heard lots of comments with regards to certain roads or certain corridors or intersections that people have asked us to look at. In addition to that, I attended and held a booth at the Municipal Government Day in 2018 and 2019, where again, I had the opportunity to talk to the public about their traffic concerns, speed limits, pedestrian areas, etc. And just before Christmas of last year, through our communications team, we also held a survey on site on the city's website, where we invited the public to comment on any concerns or raise any concerns they have with regards to the bylaw. So that is my presentation. I'm hoping that after today's meeting we can go to council, where we can give 3 readings to the update to the bylaw. As I mentioned, this isn't a comprehensive review of all the speed limits. I would like to do that, start that next year. And in addition to reviewing the schools and playground zones with harmonizing some of those times and signing at those locations. One of the things that I didn't touch with regards to this update to the bylaw is the dangerous goods routes. We have looked at this, but it became apparent during consultation that this actually requires ministerial approval, and therefore we felt that it shouldn't delay the updates to this bylaw, but we would like to go look at that for the next update. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening. Are there any questions?
So let me make my speakers bigger so I can see. Is there anybody that's got any questions? I know. I had a couple for you was one, just 132nd Avenue by St. John Paul's School. We had a delegation request for us to make some upgrades there, and something that was mentioned at the council meeting was that there might be a reduction of speeding there, and I don't think of the speed on their stretch of road, and I don't think that's appearing in this bylaw. So can you just talk about that a little bit?
You are correct that certainly west of 108th Street, which is the approach to JP2, there is no recommendation to reduce the speed on that section of road. The school is set back enough that it doesn't warrant a school zone sign-in. The road or the land contiguous with the road is largely undeveloped. Now, as development increases, it may justify a reduced speed, but at this moment in time, to meet national standards and drivers' expectancy, we feel that 70 kilometers per hour is appropriate for that section of the road. However, I would add that further east of 108th Street, we are recommending that the speed limit be reduced, again because of this is a consequence of the increased development that we're seeing in that area. We're also seeing more pedestrian activity in that area. So I believe that this summer we are also putting some more pedestrian signals across 132nd Ave. So at this moment in time, we're saying that it doesn't warrant a lower speed limit. It is something that we're mindful of, and as development increases, we will be reviewing it.
Great, thank you. And Mayor Given.
Thanks, Councillor Rusty. I had a small one, Robin. I was curious and just looking to understand more of the justification on, I guess it's 712A that comes off of 77th Ave on the west side, just north of Flying Shot Lake. It shows an 80-kilometer-an-hour speed limit there, and it seems like it is a small stretch, but there is starting to be more intensification of that neighborhood growing out there. So can you give me a little bit of a sense of why that isn't why that goes straight up to 80 rather than maybe a 70 transition zone or other limit?
Through the chair, the speed limits just south of or just north of Flying Shot Lake, we're not proposing to make any recommended changes here at this moment in time. However, we are recommending that the bylaw be amended. It's always been an 80, and we're just changing the bylaw to reflect what's actually there. Again, as development increases, it may justify the dropping the speed limit, but at this moment in time, we're just trying to reflect what's actually there.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And then I've also, are there any other people with questions? Great. I've also got two questions for Mr. Kokesh in terms of enforcement. And one of my questions is just around no parking behind enforcement vehicles within 30 feet. Is that only addressing people that are protesting and objecting to those vehicles, or is there also an issue of if something's too close, it gets in the way of the camera and it's not usable? Or can you just tell me a little bit more about that provision of not parking within 30 feet of one?
I sure can, through the chair. We just noticed a trend where people are intentionally parking in front of our conventional enforcement officers as well as photo enforcement and causing their vehicles to totally block any type of enforcement activity, whether it be with their radar or their systems where they're doing a speed operation. So we're not looking at people that are accidentally parking in front of our vehicles or engaging our officers, but certainly ones that are intentionally interfering with actual speed operations.
Right. Well, and I guess just my concern is I guess where we come down to discretion enforcement, but my concern is I live in Avondale and I regularly drive, and maybe it's a one-off place in the city, but I regularly drive by an enforcement vehicle with somebody parked right behind it just because it's a busy playground and there's limited parking on the street. And I'm just worried about those situations of where they're on street parking and it's a busy place. I think another place that I often see one is the Catholic Church, especially on a Sunday. If there's a vehicle parked there, and there often is in that zone, then it can get really busy when the school there's doing pick up and drop off, or when there's a mass. And so I don't know. I get a little bit worried about I totally get the people obstructing on purpose. I get a little bit worried about sterilizing a parking spot or two when they're needed in busy areas.
I think through the chair, our officers are very sensitive, and they understand people are going to come and go and park in those areas, and they're lawful to park there. That's for sure. It's just when they have the intent of just interfering with the operations, and they have no intention of otherwise parking there for any reason. That's just kind of what we were getting at. I understand the concern around that. There would be a very healthy dose of discretion applied to that section for sure.
And then how's that work in terms of, so you've got a photo enforcement operator who's a peace officer, but a very limited peace officer. Is that photo enforcement officer able to issue that nuisance ticket, or would they need to bring in a city enforcement officer to issue that ticket? Where I get that there's no RCMP involved, but would there be a second officer involved in issuing that ticket, or can the person operating the photo enforcement issue that ticket?
What we're looking for is the ability for our officers to engage these people and not turning it into a criminal offense, and also the opportunity for us to educate people and explain the reasons why we're there and engage people. You're correct in saying that we don't really have a resource right now through our traffic bylaw other than calling the RCMP. We have a similar section in our animal control bylaw, section 8, which provides a little bit of protection and the ability for our bylaw officers to engage people and give a ticket if really required, but we never ever had to date. With our photo enforcement officers in their vehicles, they would probably not be able to issue that ticket because we would have to appoint them as bylaw officers through the mayor and through the city. They presently only have an appointment as a contractor with us through the Solicitors General.
Right. So you still get that second eyes on it like we get the RCMP. It would just be a more efficient process with that second set of eyes, and also somebody who's a lot cheaper to employ every year than a RCMP officer is what I'm understanding. It would be, so it's not that the operator still needs a second set of eyes to issue that ticket. It's just a way more efficient process to deal with the concern.
Through the chair, I agree with those comments for sure, but it would also be, I don't believe it really warrants a criminal investigation every time, and I certainly think that we could handle it as supervisors or through our CP, community peace officer level 1s, to go and engage those type of problems or activities that we're incurring.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? The last minor one I've got is, I'm not sure if this is for Amanda or Robin, but is it possible to just get those slides attached to the agenda package on the website? I just think there were a few slides there that I'd love to be able to refer back to that weren't in the agenda package we've had so far.
Thank you, Councilor Brescia. I can update the agenda after this meeting's over.
Great, thank you. Well, in that case, is anybody willing to make a motion? Councilor Clayton. Oh, sorry. In that case, Mayor Given or Councilor Clayton, are either of you willing to make a motion? Mayor Given.
Yeah, I'd move committee recommend council give three readings to bylaw C1166I.
Great. Any discussion or debate? In that case, let's call it to question. All in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate it. And then moving on to item 3.1, we've got an item of correspondence from Aquaterra. And I'm not sure if Mayor Given, if you want to speak to this because it's addressed to you, or if there's a member of administration that wants to.
Well, I'll just introduce it really briefly. This comes as a result of council meeting with Aquaterra and a shareholders meeting. We asked them to provide us some information on an issue that Councilor Brescia, I think you had a particular interest in, but I know other members of council had as well. We know that recycling is changing quite a bit globally, and I think the City of Grande Prairie wanted to do its due diligence to make sure that that our recycling here is changing along with those times. And so there was a request made of Aquaterra, and they provided a formal response to us. I think there is an opportunity for the city to participate in that because they're going to be doing some tours as they start to look at it. But so it's here for information. I think
really to demonstrate that our utility is being responsive to requests of us that we're making because we know there are questions that the public is asking.
Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Bressi. Just for clarification for me, because I don't recall, it's been such a long time since we first started talking about recycling in the city. When recycling materials leave the city and go either for sorting or eventually get shipped off to China, are we paid for those materials? Or is Aquaterra paid for those materials? Or is it something that just happens as an operational activity to get the materials out of the way?
The Director Glaviter now has the camera. I'm not sure if that's because you want to speak to this or.
Sure, thank you, Chair Bressi. Yeah, the recycled materials are the property of Aquaterra, so they can market the recycled materials how best they see fit. So if there's a market for it, they would be compensated for those materials.
Although my understanding is they're compensated for it, but not at a rate that actually pays them for the cost of doing this. So when we pay, I think it's a little bit over $10 a month is what my household's bill anyways is for recycling, and that actually is cost to Aquaterra. So there's a lot of expense in terms of collecting them, shipping them, storing them, shipping them again. And so you get a very small amount of money for them sometimes, or sometimes China won't take them or wherever won't take them, and then you have to actually pay to landfill them. So my understanding is sometimes you sell them, but it's not a profitable undertaking, which is why we need to get billed for it.
Well, yeah, and just for the discussion, if I could, Chair Bressi, I think that this is the evolution of recycling. I think for really sort of a generation, there has been a value to recyclables. China has recently changed their approach in the last probably 2 or 3 years that has really decimated the market for them. They've become much more stringent on cross-contamination of products. They're looking for cleaner products. And so the quote-unquote value of recyclables has dropped. And it's a problem all across North America because we really have just been used to recycling being a matter of offshoring that process somewhere else and somebody else somewhere on the other side of the globe taking care of it and paying us for the right to do so. What's happening is increasingly those countries that were accepting it are no longer or reducing the amount that they're accepting. It means the amount that's being paid for those materials has decreased, as Councillor Bressi said. And it probably means that here in North America and here in Grande Prairie, at some point, we're going to have to come to grips with the changes to that system. That we've all sort of, my entire time on council, China had been buying, recyclables, and that supported things like the curbside pickup. There probably will be a point where we're going to have a discussion as council with Aquaterra as our utility provider about how this continues in the future, and because I think there's a public expectation of recycling, but we need to make sure that the public understands that the underlying system has changed from what they might have known for the past 20 years.
Well, and I know for me to be really blunt, I strongly suspect that I'm paying $10 a month for my recycling to get shipped halfway across the country and landfilled somewhere. So I really suspect that often the recycling I'm paying Aquaterra to recycle is actually having worse environmental impact than if it just went into our landfill here. And I don't think that's an Aquaterra issue. I think Aquaterra is doing everything it can do. I think that's just a reflection of the world market, and I don't know if single source recycling works anymore in our current economy. So I think it is a conversation we need to have with the city. I'm just kind of curious if people are interested in pushing that conversation now, or if that's something we kick down the road. So we can just receive this information and go, okay, that's in Aquaterra's hands, and hopefully this happens sometime. Or we potentially could be making this a conversation now, and I don't know what other people's desires are. Mine are definitely, if our residents are potentially paying money to get worse environmental impact, my opinion is I'd love us to dig into that and see if changes need to be made now, but I don't know if that's a priority for others.
I'll just say that it does, the letter does offer the opportunity to for Aquaterra was intending prior to COVID to tour some of the material recycling facilities. And there is an opportunity for council and administration representatives to see that. I think that would be a useful step for us to understand exactly what does happen. I'm not sure that I disagree with you, Councillor Bressi, but I also don't know firsthand, neither one of us does, what exactly does happen. Recycling audits are becoming a common practice now to understand, okay, when I put my blue bag out, what actually does happen to that? I think that's worthwhile for us to understand so that we can start to make informed decisions, I think. And it sounds like Aquaterra is open to the city participating in that. So I think we should take them up on the offer.
Well, I'm wondering what committee might think about in terms of actually formalizing that, in terms of asking council to direct the mayor to respond to this letter saying we'd be interested in learning more and opportunities. And kind of where I'm going there with that is, I think to date it's been largely myself asking questions of Aquaterra and pushing this, and I don't know how much I'm doing that on my own and how much my views are shared by council, and you folks are just happy to let me be the vocal one. And I'm wondering if it might be worth taking a shot at formalizing as council. Yes, this is something that not just Councillor Bressi, as this letter is replying to something I said, but if council might be interested in formalizing this in terms of we as council are interested in learning more about this. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Brescia. The reason I raised this is because as I was doing some separating and recycling into my blue bag just yesterday, it occurred to me that there's coming more and more effort to ensure that the recycling is going to be usable. And the fact that I'm paying to have it picked up and dealt with by Aquaterra, I'm wondering how much, whether or not all the effort is worth it. And so just to answer your question, I would suggest that I'm not the only one in the community that's thinking that way. And I think it would be useful to start to pursue the question.
So, I think that without getting to the, you guys making me always write letters, but I think there's another way to start the same process, would be committee direct administration, follow up with Aquaterra to arrange tours for interested members of council to Aquaterra, to material recycling facilities. I think something as simple as that. Administration can do the work. Members of council that are interested can choose to join those tours when they're available. And then coming out of those tours, if there's additional discussion to be had, then, council members could bring that forward.
Yeah, well, are you willing to make that motion, Mayor Given?
Yeah, I'd be happy to move that the committee direct administration follow up with Aquaterra management to coordinate council and administration participation as appropriate of Aquaterra's material recycling facility processes. Period.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate you make that motion. That's something I'll definitely support. Is there any conversation on that motion? Well, in that case, I'll call to question. All in favor? And opposed? One opposed and two in favor, so that motion carries. And then moving on to item 3.2,
Sorry, Councillor Bressi. Did you indicate me as opposed?
Yeah, sorry. Maybe you're lagging. So all right. So
thank you.
Okay, so then that motion carries unanimously. Great. I was curious about that, Councillor Clayton. So I'm glad you. Cool. So then that motion carries unanimously, and then moving on to item 3.2, we've got a letter from the County of Grande Prairie, and Mayor Given, maybe would you be willing to tee it up a little bit, and then Director Glavin can give us more context?
Sure. Yeah. So, council members, you can see the letter here. It is a request that actually looks like it was initiated by the development industry. There is a missing gap in the paving around the city that really connects the Whispering Ridge neighborhood in the county into the city. There's this letter proposes some kind of work to happen this year, but it is at a pretty high level. And so I know our management team has been in contact with the county to get some of the more technical details, a little bit more clarity about what it is the county's actually asking. It looks like, the letter was dated July 13th, which is a little while ago, but would note that the initial sort of contact from the development industry to the county was back June 16th. And so, this has taken a couple of months to get to us. And it sounds like they're asking for some action to happen in this construction season. And I don't really know whether the city's processes allow for that. And I also don't know what the state of the discussion has been between city and county administration. So, but there's a request here, and I'm curious what Director Glavin or any of our other management team have had in terms by way of discussion.
Yeah, and Director Glavin, if you just share any context you think might be useful, but I'm especially just interested in terms of is this a practical request at the time we're in at the year? Is this something that council can act on if we desire to, or is it, just how practical is it, and is there any other context that you'd like to give?
Sure, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Yeah, so Mayor Given did hit kind of the high notes of the letter that we received. This came in on the 13th, which was the last council meeting that we had, so it wasn't able to be on an agenda up until now, which caused even more of a lag here for us to deal with it. With regard to time frame, this would not be something that would fit the mold of a project that we could complete in this construction season. Just looking at what the letter is outlining, being a traffic impact assessment, assuming that the county did the procurement on that, you're looking at least a month for something to come out of that. Assuming that the results of it were satisfactory to the city and council to form an agreement, the design of the road and construction supervision would need to be put out for an RFP. Again, assuming very quick turnaround on that, likely a month would be very quick. And then followed by a tender for the actual construction of the section, followed by the actual construction of whoever won the tender. You'd be looking at, again, lightning speed, 3 months would be the very quickest we could possibly get something through our process, which would bring us to the point where the asphalt plants would be shut down for the year. And we'd miss that window in order to actually pave the road. In order to fulfill the timelines within the letter as it was presented to us, we'd have to direct award both the engineering and the construction of the project. This would not conform to the trade agreements that we're subject to in view of our procurement department. It doesn't meet any of the scenarios that would allow for us to do that. There is one scenario that you could stretch the argument that it's time sensitive in nature based on an unforeseen circumstance. That would be stretching this beyond probably its intended use in this case, as this is something that could reasonably have been planned for a little bit earlier.
Great, thank you. Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. Really appreciate the comments from the mayor as well as from Director Glavin, because it sort of it intrigues me to why the rush and sure, with summer vacations, etc., there's a little bit of a lag there, but this doesn't seem to be something that needs to be rushed. And so maybe a question for the mayor, Director Glavin, or for CAO Galante. Possibly this is something that could be discussed as part of the ICF road work network systems are something that are potentially an opportunity for cost sharing. And this piece, seeing that it's not that I can't see unless council or anyone else council can see a rush for it, maybe it can be something that can be included in our discussions with the county in our ICF discussions going forward.
Yeah, I'd echo those thoughts in terms of, we heard earlier today that about a truck route that's not happening in the city. I can think of several other examples of the city where our network is strained because of development in the county impacting the city, and maybe there's areas where the city's impacting the county in adverse ways. I honestly don't know that because we haven't had that holistic conversation, but I note that when I look at the county's economic development plan, they've got plans to develop an entire donut around the city, which will have an impact on our infrastructure again and again and again. And so I think for me, I'd love to work together on this road, but I'd like to work together on all of our roads that are connected. And so I think that I'd personally love us to find a process where we can be talking about this holistically, not in these one-offs, because when we're talking one-off, we get a situation today where there might be a good idea, but we can't act on it because it's too late. Whereas if we had a process in place, we could be much more proactive about these things to give all of our residents better services.
Yeah, just if I can, Chair Bressy, I think you're bang on there. I think our council would support any opportunity for cost sharing on projects that make sense to both municipalities. The rushing part of it, unless the county can come forward to administration with some reasons of why to rush it that we're unaware of, then otherwise it just seems, as the ITF committee and the mayor continue and the CAO continue to have conversations with their counterpart, this seems something that should be part of a full conversation, in my opinion.
Mayor Given.
Yeah, the only other thing that I was going to add, along a similar line to the discussion already, is that this isn't the only situation like this. There are some that exist today. There may be more in the future, and the province has actually amended legislation to allow for a new tool to address these kind of intermunicipal infrastructure needs. It's called a intermunicipal offsite levy, and so that's a tool that we're not currently using in the Grande Prairie region. Would seem to be tailor-made to be able to sort of deal with these types of issues, and so I would like to see us maybe use this as an opportunity to broach this issue with the county and see if there's an interest in approaching this in a more systematic way, as others have said, and maybe making use of that intermunicipal offsite levy. So I would agree with the ideas about sending it forward, to the ICF discussions. Thankfully, we have one this week, so it won't take us 2 months to respond to the county. We'll be able to respond to them and at least start that discussion. So hopefully together the two councils can figure out a way to do this on an ongoing basis rather than as one-offs.
Okay, well, would somebody be willing to make a motion? Mayor Given?
Sure. So I'll move that we receive the letter from the county for information and direct administration to request this item be added to the ICF meeting later this week, period.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a good motion. Any discussion or debate on it? In that case, Councillor Clayton, just so you know, I can't see you right now, and I think that you're out of the meeting altogether, but that's okay. We still got quorum. So all in favor of this motion? And that motion carries. And any other business with this that we need to discuss? Great. In that case, let's move on to our outstanding items list, and that is Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair Bressy. Currently, everything on there is more or less on track. The one without a date, secondary suites, we did just receive part of the proposal from UDI on that, and we're going to discuss that tomorrow and hopefully have some information at the next committee meeting on what that looks like going forward.
Great. Mayor Gibbon, would you be willing to make a motion to accept this?
I guess it's up to me. Yes, I would. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Clayton, we've just got a motion on the floor to accept our outstanding items list. There were no amendments to it. So I'll call the question, the motion to accept the outstanding items list. All in favor? Councillor Clayton, are you in favor of accepting the outstanding items list or opposed? Councillor Clayton, can you hear us? Oh, all right.
I think she's got some lag.
Councillor Clayton, can you hear us? I think I see. Oh, can you hear us, Councillor Clayton? Can you hear us, Councillor Clayton? I think that I don't know if this is permissible, but am I?
I can hear you now.
Great. So we've got a motion to accept the outstanding items list, and there were no amendments to it. So, so all in favor of accepting the outstanding items list as it was in our agenda package? And that motion carries. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for a morning of good work. Director Glavin, I'm just going to give you a quick phone call if that's all right about something.
See you, everyone.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.